And the code she named Cleaner. I manage access for a living. Doors mostly, and the numbers that talk to them. My days are a catalog of tiny permissions, temporary codes for contractors, weekend passes for event crews, one-time links that let people pretend a latch is a handshake. It makes you believe order can be arranged, that a life is just a building you configure correctly and then trust. Which is why the first tremor didn't come like thunder. It arrived as a log entry at 11:18 p.m., quietly honest. Unit 5B, code used. Cleaner, my admin dashboard reported, as if our apartment had hired help after midnight. We don't have a cleaner. We have a blue rug that forgives us and a habit of doing dishes at 10:47. I stared at the word until it tried to be something else. The log gave me the rest. Code created at 21:06 on the same evening from my wife's phone, distributed via text to an unknown number, 3 attempted entries before success. If you've never felt your ribs learn a new choreography, I don't recommend it. Myra was at a late install, her text said earlier, a phrase that used to be a bored honesty and now felt like a password. She curates pop-ups in spaces that shouldn't be beautiful and makes them art for a month. I love that about her, how she bullies light into kindness. I also know she doesn't name things lazily. Cleaner wasn't a joke. Cleaner was cover. I could have called. I could have said, who needs a mop at midnight? Instead, I toggled the feed from our hall camera and watched a stranger's shoulder pass out of frame 20 minutes earlier, the sliver of a coat, a hand with a white scar across the knuckle, the confident economy of someone who reads instructions as if they wrote them. My name is Mark. I get paid, essentially, to keep rooms honest. I sat in the dark kitchen and let the lamp burn a small circle that didn't feel like safety. At 12:03 a.m. our lock chirped again. Unit 5B, code used, cleaner exit. Whoever cleaner was, he left. My phone vibrated a minute later. Myra, headed home, you up? I typed always and felt like a cliché and a person at the same time. She came in with the weather on her, city air in the folds of her coat. She kissed me like she always does, a small press at the corner of my mouth that says the rest can wait, and hung the coat on the back of a chair instead of the hook by the door, a deviation so ordinary it felt like a siren. You ate, she asked. I didn't. We ran over time. I can make something, I said, standing then not. The room was a glass we were both trying not to fog. She leaned her hip against the counter, hands on the edge, head tipped. You're looking at me like you found a problem I forgot to label. You named a code, I said, cleaner. Her lashes did a half-second of math. Then she nodded, the kind of nod that says anger is optional but truth is. I did, she said. For who? I asked. For a door I didn't know how to knock on, she said, and then because Myra doesn't do coy when it matters. For Eli. The name arrived like a cool hand and like an insult. Eli, the architectural photographer who'd been hanging around her last exhibit. The one who compliments light the way other men compliment skin. I'd watched him talk about brick like it was a living animal and Myra look at him like the city had sent her a poem written in a font only she could read. Did he come here? I asked, because I needed to make the floor solid. He entered the hall, she said. He stood at the door, he didn't come inside. And you, I said. I wasn't here, she said. I wanted to be. I asked him to meet at the studio. I sent the code before I decided to text him a different address. He tried anyway. The logs were facts. People rarely are. I stepped closer and touched her wrist, felt the telltale pulse that always tells the truth first. What is this? I asked, not righteous, practical, like I would ask a client why their conference room keeps forgetting its own schedule. She looked at me as if I were a horizon she was deciding whether to swim toward. It's me missing the version of myself who doesn't ask the room for permission before she laughs, she said. It's a man who sensed that and walked toward it. It's you, who I love, who makes rooms safe and sometimes too well arranged. There are moments when the worst thing you can do is reach for the line you've practiced. I didn't say, "You could have told me." I didn't say, "So tell me now." I said nothing long enough to make listening a physical act. She stepped into that silence, not to fill it, but to share it. "Do you want me to move out for a week?" she asked, and the question slapped me because it was generous and afraid and unfair and brave. "I want you to come home," I said. "Home can have a new door." We ate toast and lay in bed like people who invented it. When she reached for me, it wasn't a plea or a cover. It was a report from the body to the body. We moved slower than we usually do, deliberate, attentive, with that bright edge that sits between apology and promise. The touch wasn't contraband. It was a census. She held the back of my neck the way you hold a thought you don't want to lose. I learned again the curve of her shoulder and the sound she makes when relief is allowed into the room. We kept our eyes open. It was not a fix. It was a fact that helped. In the morning, the dashboard felt briefly like paperwork. I almost closed the tab. Then a new log flashed from another building entirely. I managed the access for Myra's pop-up space on Calder Street, too. She'd asked me to donate my time when the budget did what budgets do. Calder Loft code created, guessed by, Myra distributed to, +1, the number matched the one cleaner had been sent to. A time stamp 1700. This afternoon. I sat with my coffee a long time, the ceramic warming my palm, the heat refusing to become comfort. Cowardice is a shape that fits your hand too easily when you design systems. I could watch another door or I could go stand in front of one. I texted Myra, "Can I swing by the loft after lunch? 3 dots. Then, you'll see more than the installation." I arrived early and waited across the street with a paper cup that turned my fingers into a small furnace. The Calder loft used to be a seamstress school. The windows looked like unblinking eyes. At 16:53, Myra turned the corner with that particular speed she uses when she's on time in a way that looks like late. Eli came from the opposite block, camera bag across his chest, hair trying to be obedient and failing charmingly. He saw her first. He's a man who knows where to put his hands. He kept them visible and gentle, palms lifted like a choreography of respect. They met at the keypad. She typed, the lock buzzed, they went in. I could have made the lock stall, could have trigged a please wait, override in progress. That would have forced them back onto the sidewalk where conversations are honest because there's nowhere to sit. Instead, I crossed the street and followed because sometimes you respect the architecture too much. Sometimes you want to show up where sound carries. The stairwell smelled like old starch and new ambition. On the landing outside the loft door, I heard voices, the kind of careful register that means people are telling the truth but calibrating the edges. I knocked. The door opened to a room full of light trying its best. Myra stood by a long table scattered with small metal brackets. Eli was near the window, all that glass making his face a study in confession. "Mark," she said, "my name an invitation and a dare and a relief." Eli nodded, polite, prepared, a man who had rehearsed being disliked. "I can give you space," he said, hand already on his bag strap. "Stay," I said. "If I'm learning a language, I want the native speakers present." He smiled and, to his credit, didn't mistake my line for olive branch. He stayed where he was, the window framing him like he knew what glass is for. I turned to Myra. "You sent him a code," I said. "You named it guest here, cleaner at home." "Because one is honest and one is a lie," she said. "I wanted home to keep its shape. This place can be the mess." What is he? I asked, glancing at Eli only to allow gravity to redistribute. A spark, a test, a mirror. An accelerant, Eli said softly, as if auditioning for the least flattering word and taking it anyway. I don't want to be the hero of this story. I want to be the man who notices what it costs to pretend you're not on fire. Myra's jaw flexed. He took pictures of a building I installed last month, she said to me. The way he looked at it, it made me feel like the thing knew it was allowed to be gorgeous. I wanted that gaze on me without asking you to become someone else to deliver it. I walked to the table and touched one of the brackets, the cold logic of hardware insisting on itself. Okay, I said. Here's my language, I'm boundary and I'm heat. I need to know which door we're using and why. Myra stepped closer. She smells like cedar and worry when she's telling the truth. I want you without becoming a woman who never wants anything else, she said. When I say I miss the unruly part of me, I want to say it to you. I want us to build a room where that version is welcome. Eli watched us like we were a photograph that could still be composed better. He set his bag down deliberately. If I leave right now, he said, and you two write a rule that keeps me out, I will not try to pick the lock. But if I stay another hour, I will imagine things that are none of my business. I almost liked him for narrating the knife. Then leave, I said. Let me fail at this alone if I have to. He nodded, no offended theater, no flourish, just a small, adult grief in the corners of his mouth. Text me if you ever need me to be a bad idea again, he told Myra, which was either the worst or the most honest blessing I've ever heard. Then he went. We stood in the light he left the window for. It was good light. It made the dust feel like part of the work. Myra lifted her hands and set them on my chest and then didn't push or pull. She waited for the contact to report back. If we keep pretending everything we want fits into the word married, she said, we will eventually hate it. Then stop pretending, I said. Say the want before it finds a code and names itself. She kissed me there in the studio like we paid rent on the air. It started small and then the room discovered a different purpose. Heat with manners, our specialty. Her mouth was a question she knew the answer to. My hand found the side of her neck where a whisper lives, and she made that sound that means the world shrank to the correct size. It wasn't a claim staked in a rival's shadow. It wasn't a performance. It was us agreeing on the room and the light. When we pulled apart, the hardware on the table looked scandalized and proud. We wrote a rule on the back of an install sheet because that's what we do when we mean it. It said, truth before logistics. No codes named for lies. If you want weather, ask for a window. If you want a guest, introduce him as one. We both signed the page, then laughed at ourselves, and the laughter saved us from being insufferable. At home, I deleted Cleaner and renamed the backup profile WILDCARD. It required both our phones near the door to work. Not control, choreography. The next afternoon, I found a text from Eli to Myra that she'd left face up by choice. Thank you for not needing me. She sent him a picture in reply, a shot of our small second bedroom emptied of boxes, 2 pillows on the floor, a lamp that makes everyone look like they had a better day. We're building a room, she wrote. He sent back a single period, full stop. Sometimes I still catch my eye skittering to the dashboard. Old habits look for fires. The logs now are boring in the way health is. Myra uses her code at sane hours. I use mine. When we need heat, we text each other window. And then we meet in the room we made and act like people who know the door can close, which is exactly why it doesn't have to. One night, a month later, we walked past a cafe window and saw Eli inside alone, editing on his laptop, his face held up by one hand like the building he was working on was heavy. He looked up and saw us and lifted 2 fingers. That polite salute of people who have done something brave and agreed not to ruin it afterward. We lifted ours back and kept walking. We went home and stood at our door and waited for the little chirp that says, "Yes, you belong." It sounded like a promise that was learning to be a habit. We still argue. We still make toast too late and the rug still forgives us. When she wants unruly, she says the word instead of nomming a code. When I need boundary, I don't hide behind a dashboard, I say it. And when the lock cycles under our hands, I feel something I didn't know a machine could teach me. The difference between secrecy and privacy, between permission and desire, between a door that hides and a door that keeps. On our hallway shelf sits a strip of paper with our rule on it, smudged where our thumbs held it too tight that day we wrote it. It isn't sacred, but it's ours. People talk a lot about trust like it's a wall. I've spent my life around walls. Trust is a door. You keep it maintained. You listen for sticks. You add graphite when it's honest to. You don't call it cleaner and expect it to behave. You meet at the threshold and decide together which way you're walking.